It began with a sound, not thunder, not the wind, a slow, deliberate scratching at the door. Outside, the storm screamed across the Cascade Range, snow against glass, wind slamming into the cabin walls. Inside, firelight flickered against cedar panels, shadows stretching like living things, and in the middle of it all, Claire Morgan froze. She knew the language of this forest, the groan of trees under frost, the lonely cry of a hawk, the moan of wind between pines. But this sound, this was different. It was small, desperate, alive. Her breath clouded in the air as she set her mug down. For a long heartbeat, she just listened. Scratch, pause, scratch again. The fire cracked once, as if urging her to move. She pulled on her coat, stepped closer to the door, and opened it. A rush of white swallowed the world. Snow spiraled in the porch light, turning the forest into a silent ocean. And there, half buried in frost, stood a bobcat. Not wild in the way danger is wild, but in the way truth is raw and unhidden. Its golden eyes locked on hers. Ashen, that's what she'd call him later. But that night she only saw hunger, exhaustion, and behind him, a smaller shape barely breathing. A kitten limp, matted with ice and blood. The world stopped. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The mother didn't growl, didn't flee. She only looked at Claire as if asking, "Please." Claire whispered, barely a sound. "Oh my God," she took one slow step forward. The bobcat flinched but stayed. Another step. Snow blew between them, catching the orange glow of the porch light. Two mothers, two heartbeats, each carrying something she refused to lose. Claire bent down. "You want me to help?" The bobcat blinked once, slow. That was enough. And that's the thing about the wild. Sometimes it doesn't ask with words. Sometimes it just knocks. Long before that night, before the snow and the storm, Claire Morgan had already been learning how to breathe again. 6 months earlier, she'd left Seattle, left the city noise, the deadlines, the grief that had eaten her from the inside out. She'd sold her car, boxed up her old life, and moved into her grandmother's abandoned cabin on the edge of the Cascades. People told her she'd lose her mind out here, but she'd already lost it once. So she traded skyscrapers for trees, deadlines for silence, and in that silence she started to heal. Every morning began the same, coffee steaming in the cold air, camera resting on her lap, and the forest waking slow. Mist over the creek, a deer nosing through ferns, birds arguing over breakfast. That was peace, the kind you don't notice until you've been starved of it. Then one morning something changed. Through her lens, at the far edge of the clearing, a shape moved, low, powerful, silent. Not a deer, not a fox, a bobcat. Its coat glowed amber in the rising sun, fur rippling like smoke. It stood still, watching her. And she watched back, not daring to breathe. Then it turned, tail flicking, and vanished into the pines. That night she looked through the photos again and again. Those eyes, that calm strength, something inside her shifted. It felt as if the forest had finally looked back. From then on he came often, always at dawn, always at a distance. Enough to see, never enough to touch. She named him quietly Ashen. At first she swore she wouldn't interfere. But one morning, frost rimmed the porch rail and Ashen looked thinner, ribs faint under fur, ears twitching at every sound. Her chest tightened. There were rules: don't feed wildlife, don't interfere. But some rules don't fit inside a human heart. That night she left a plate near the clearing, raw chicken, just enough for one meal. She waited, nothing. The next night the food vanished, maybe raccoons, then again and again. Until one dawn she caught him there, silent, cautious, eyes like liquid fire. He moved forward one step, then another, grabbed a piece and disappeared. Claire smiled through the cold. "You're welcome," she whispered to the empty air. After that, it became ritual. Sometimes she left food, sometimes she didn't, and each time Ashen came a little closer. Wildness has its own kind of trust, slow, fragile, sacred. Then winter arrived, the air turned to glass. The world went white. She woke each morning to deeper silence, deeper snow. The trees sagged under the weight of it. Each night she added another log to the fire and hoped he'd made it through another day. Then one morning she saw them. Two sets of tracks, one large, one small, tiny paw prints weaving beside the bigger ones. Her breath caught. "You've got a baby," she whispered. It filled her with warmth and dread. The forest can be merciless to the small. Still, every morning she looked for those prints, a tiny proof of survival, until the storm came. For 3 days, the mountains vanished behind walls of white. The wind howled through the chimney. The world outside went silent. No birds, no life, no sound except the groan of snow sliding from the roof. On the 4th day, the storm broke. Claire stepped into a world remade. Snow nearly to her knees, light so bright it hurt to see. She carried a bucket of food to the clearing, boots crunching through the crust. Fresh tracks, Ashens, but the smaller ones were gone, just one set now. Her voice trembled. "Where's your baby?" That night sleep wouldn't come. Every creak in the wood made her sit up. Every gust outside felt like something calling her name, and then she heard it scratch, whimper, scratch again. She froze. The fire hissed behind her. She walked to the door, hands shaking, breath shallow. Outside, a shadow pressed against the storm. Ashen, alive, barely standing, at his paws a small, twisted bundle of fur, the kitten. Claire opened the door. The cold hit her face like knives. Snow whipped between them. Ashen didn't move, didn't growl. He only stared, those amber eyes pleading. She dropped to her knees. The kitten's chest moved weakly. Its leg hung broken. Blood, ice, silence. She whispered, "You want me to help?" Ashen blinked. That was enough. She wrapped the kitten in a towel and rose slowly. Ashen let out a sound that wasn't quite a growl, half cry, half goodbye. Claire whispered through tears, "I'll take care of him." "I promise." Then she closed the door, and the sound of the storm rushed back in. She called the local wildlife biologist, Dr. Rowan. His voice sharpened when he heard the story. "She brought it to you?" "Yes, that's extraordinary. Keep him warm, get him here fast." But the roads were ice, 3 hours to the nearest center. If she could even get through, she didn't think. She just moved. Blankets, gloves, pet carrier. "Hold on, little one," she whispered. Hold on. The tires slid. Snow slashed across the windshield, white everywhere. Every mile was a prayer, every curve a plea. When the lights of the wildlife center finally appeared, she was sobbing. She burst through the doors, coat drenched, voice shaking. "Bobcat kitten, injured, brought by mother, needs help now." They took the carrier from her hands and vanished behind swinging doors. Then everything stopped, silence again. Just her, the ticking of a clock, and snow melting into puddles at her boots. Hours passed, then the door opened. A woman in scrubs smiled softly. "He's alive, alive." The words cracked something inside her. Relief poured out like light. Through the observation window, she saw him, tiny, bandaged, breathing. She pressed her hand to the glass. "Hang in there, Ember." The name just came, because even in the coldest storm, there's always a spark. Days turned to weeks. Every morning she called for updates. "He's improving." Each time she heard it, she could finally exhale. But one day, Dr. Rowan told her the truth. He may never return to the wild, too young, too used to people. That fear, it's what keeps them alive out there. She nodded, staring at the photo she'd taken of Ashen months ago. What happens if he can't go back? There are sanctuaries, permits. It's a lot of work. That night, she sat by the fire, thinking about promises. And by morning, she knew, if Ember couldn't go back to the wild, she'd bring the wild to him. She applied for the license. Built the enclosure herself, 20 by 30 feet of living forest, rocks, stream, trees, shade. It wasn't a cage, it was a fragment of freedom. When the state approved it, she drove back to the center. Dr. Rowan met her with a smile. "He's ready." In the crate, Ember watched her with bright gold eyes. Claire knelt, whispering, "You ready to come home?" The drive back was sunlight and silence. No storm this time, just the sound of tires on thawing road. When she opened the crate at the new enclosure, Ember hesitated. Then, one paw at a time, he stepped into the grass, sniffed the wind, touched the stream, and for the first time he purred. Claire laughed softly, tears on her cheeks. "Welcome home, little one." That night she sat on the porch under a half moon. The forest hummed again, crickets, wind, life returning, and then she felt it, a presence. At the tree line, two golden eyes glowed in the dark, Ashen. He stood still, watching the enclosure, watching his son. Inside, Ember lifted his head. For a moment, time folded in on itself. No sound, no movement, only understanding. Ashen blinked once, then turned and melted back into the woods. Claire stood there long after he vanished. The cold stung her skin, but her heart was warm. That was the miracle, not survival, not rescue, but that moment when the wild came back to see what love had done. Spring came fast that year. The ground softened, the streams ran clear, and Ember grew strong, muscles lean, coat gold as the sun. Every morning, Claire watched him from the porch, coffee in hand. He moved with quiet grace, half wild, half home. At night, sometimes she heard soft rustling outside the fence. Once she caught a glimpse, Ashen again, thinner now, older. He didn't come close. He didn't need to. Ember always knew before she did. He'd lift his head, ears forward, eyes fixed on the trees. Two worlds still connected by something invisible and real. Months passed, summer bled into autumn. The forest burned gold and red. Ember prowled beneath it, strong, calm, untamed. One night, lightning flashed over the ridge, thunder rolling through the valley. Claire ran out to check the enclosure, worried he might panic. But he was sitting beneath the wooden shelter, eyes glowing faintly in the storm light, composed, strong. Unafraid, she smiled through the rain. "You're your mother's son." Years later, she still lives in that same cabin, still makes her coffee before dawn, still waits for the forest to wake. Ember is older now, slower. When he moves, she sees the echo of Ashen in every motion. Sometimes, when the moon is full, he sits at the far edge of the enclosure, staring into the woods, and for a moment she swears she sees two sets of eyes instead of one. People ask her why she stayed, why she built her life around a wild thing. She always smiles and says, because once in a lifetime, the wild knocks on your door, and if you're brave enough to open it, it changes everything. She never tells the story for fame, never posts the photos online. She keeps it close like a warm ember in her chest, because the truth is simple. You can rescue something wild and somehow it rescues you right back. When she looks at Ember through the fence now, she no longer feels pity, only awe. The wind moves through the pines, the world hums, and she whispers into the night, "Thank you for trusting me." Because sometimes kindness doesn't roar. Sometimes it just waits quietly at the door, hoping someone's brave enough to open it.